Welcome back to the show. Let's get into fantasy with the crew from Fantasy Football Today. If you haven't already, scan the QR code however you listen to your podcast. Check them out on YouTube. Ask them on social media, all in an effort to help you win your league. Well, it's Jordan Mason season in Minnesota in fantasy. Former 49ers running back, best handcuff so far after Aaron Jones went on injured reserve this week with a hamstring injury. Vikings will bring Cam Akers back to the practice squad, but all roads lead to Jordan Mason getting a majority of the snaps, and some of our fantasy analysts have moved him into RB2 categories, but others, like Jamey Eisenberg, believe that he is RB1 worthy. Sportsline, interestingly enough, maybe not as high on the running back as some of our others. Let's bring in the aforementioned FFT crew, Jamey and Dave Richard, as well as Heath Cummings joining us. So, Jamey, take me through the start of the week one, Jordan Mason.
Yeah, sometimes you get a gift, and this is a gift. You know, you look at the situation. He's done a nice job so far through the early part of the season. 24 carries, 98 yards, not a big fantasy production, not a big fantasy performance yet, but that's coming this week. It's a perfect storm. Cincinnati is not one of the best run defenses, as we're well aware. We've already seen Dylan Sampson have a good game against them. Both Jaguars running backs last week had good games against this defense. And now you're looking at what Mason has done in his track record when he's gotten work. 6 games last year where he had at least 14 carries, and he averaged 15.4 PPR points in those 6 games. So he's going to get the work. He should be productive. In Kevin O'Connell, I trust. And with the quarterback situation being what it is for Minnesota, lean on Jordan Mason as much as you can. Hopefully Christian Darrisaw comes back. That's a potential for this week. Hopefully Ryan Kelly clears the concussion protocol, their center. So there are some offensive line concerns a little bit for Jordan Mason, but I think he's going to have an opportunity to get 20-plus touches, and against Cincinnati, I will take my chances with that.
All right, those fantasy managers that have Mason are very bullish this week. So in terms of starts, we're going to go Jamey, Dave, and Heath. Eisenberg, lay it on us. Who are we starting this week?
Well, the last 2 players to win NFC Player of the Week played against Chicago Bears. Dak Prescott gets the Chicago Bears this week. So J.J. McCarthy at the start of the season, Jared Goff last week. I didn't want to just follow the pattern of beating up on the Bears. This was my other option for start of the week in Dak Prescott. But he's coming off a strong game against the Dallas Cowboys. Should take advantage of this beat-up secondary for Chicago. Like the setup for all the pass catchers there. The running backs are going to be tougher to trust as must-start guys. Really, they're more flex plays, but I think they're worth trusting this week. As at borderline number 2 running backs. But Ramondre Stevenson coming off the game that we saw last week. Pittsburgh's run defense is an absolute mess right now. So basically, if you run away from TJ Watt, you're going to have success, and Ramondre is the lead running back for the Patriots. I think this is going to be Isiah Pacheco's best game. We haven't seen them play with the lead. We've seen the Giants in the first 2 weeks of the season struggle with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Last week they struggled with Javonte Williams. I think they give Pacheco an opportunity to get on track this week, and I think he will. Deebo Samuel's been the best receiver for the Commanders, so whether it's Jaden Daniels or Marcus Mariota, Samuel's still a number 2 wide receiver. And Michael Pittman had one great game against the Dolphins, one bad game against Patrick Surtain. No more Surtain. It's going to be an easy matchup for him against Titans.
Dak is a top 5 quarterback this week. I love that call. But in that same game, Caleb Williams, he's earned it 2 weeks so far this season, at least 21 fantasy points in each of those 2 games. Now he's taking on Dallas. They've allowed at least 24 fantasy points to each of the 2 quarterbacks that they've gone up against. Their pass rush is bad. Their secondary is bad. Normally, I'm nervous about offensive players when their defensive coordinator comes back or their coach comes back and he's the defensive coordinator of the opposing team. Eberflus is the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys. I don't think that that's going to be an issue here. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Caleb has another good game again. Other starts that I like this week, Jaylen Warren and J.K. Dobbins. They have looked great so far this season. Warren, especially last week, had a career-high 18 touches. I don't think it's a coincidence. He should see as much work against the Patriots. They got thrashed in the pass game last week by Achane. Maybe Warren does a decent fraction of that. Tetairoa McMillan goes up against the Falcons. Their pass rush is good. Their secondary banged up. A.J. Terrell, their best corner, week to week with an injury. I don't expect him to play. I think that opens things up for McMillan as the number 1 target getter for Carolina. And Juwan Jennings, I can't fight it anymore, Tommy. 10 targets last week. 10 targets in his last 2 games of 2024, at least 7 targets in 8 of his last 11 games. He's for real. He's a number 2 wide receiver.
So as you saw on the graphics, I like Jordan Mason more than Jamey does. I like Caleb Williams more than Dave does, but I sent my names in last, so I had to dig a little deeper for the starts this week. DeAndre Swift was one of my guys in draft season. Admittedly, even with the touchdown last week, I've been a little bit disappointed. I think he and Caleb Williams get going this week. because that game has an over-under of 50.5, tied for the highest one on the slate. The Bears are actually favored with an implied team total of 26. Swift is still the clear lead back for the Bears. Kyle Monangai got some carries last week. It was almost entirely in garbage time. Let's hope that injury is nothing major. I don't think it is. I'm also starting Kenneth Walker, which makes me a little bit nervous because he did run much better than Zach Charbonnet last week, but the split in touches was still very similar. If Charbonnet's foot injury keeps him out, we'll move Walker up into top 12 consideration as well. Love Jacoby Myers. Stop underrating him, please. He's a borderline top 12 wide receiver this week. I've really enjoyed the usage for Chris Olave early in the season, and that Seattle secondary is really banged up right now. And then I had Harold Fannin on this list last week, and it's not often that a guy is on the starts list 2 weeks in a row, and you go on to CBSSports.com and look at his roster rate, and it's 52%. He's still available in almost half of leagues. If you have TJ Hawkinson or Mark Andrews still in your starting spot, go get Harold Fannin, start him over those guys.
Okay, something I know you guys have certainly mentioned before. In terms of sits, we're going to go and throw it back to Heath and go back around the other way. Hopefully you got enough voice here for us, Heath, but give us through your sits this week.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with a couple of maybe the starts from Dave and Jamey. I am not wanting to start Isiah Pacheco. I do agree with Jamey that it might be his best game, but his best game so far this season is 29 total yards. That's not going to be a good enough to start him. So I'm going to sit Isiah Pacheco against the Giants. I think one of the Chiefs running backs probably has more than 10 fantasy points for the first time this year. I have no idea which one it will be. Pacheco's just barely been the lead back over Kareem Hunt, but Kareem Hunt gets more high-value targets than Pacheco does, and there's just a little bit of chatter that they might be getting more comfortable with the idea of giving the ball to Brashard Smith a few more times. If that guy breaks even one carry, they're going to give him a lot more touches because nobody else in this run game has looked good at all. Tyrone Tracy may be getting replaced by Cam Scatterbo. Don't start him. I'm not sure the Giants are going to. J.K. Dobbins is a better start. It is a revenge game. We like those. But I also am not sure the Broncos are underdogs in this game. If they fall behind, that's not a good game script for J.K. Dobbins. I'd like to sit Calvin Ridley at least one more week. He's had some bad matchups to start the year. I still think he can be a starting wide receiver rest of the season, but I need to see that connection with Cam Ward before I want to trust him in my starting lineup. And then a lot of people seem to think that Carson Wentz is going to make this Vikings pass offense look better than it has so far. I am not one of those people. I do not want to start TJ Hawkinson.
I think Wentz might make them a little bit better, but I still get nervous about TJ Hawkinson just because of how bad he's been to start the season. 3 names at wide receiver. Everybody knows who they are. I'm nervous about all 3 of them. It's Mike Evans, it's Terry McLaurin, and it's DJ Moore. Mike Evans against the Jets, he's going to see a lot of Sauce Gardner. And you might say, well, if there's no Emeka Egbuka, that means there's going to be a lot of targets. He's had at least 8 targets in each game this year. He has yet to get more than like 10.6 PPR points. He makes me a little bit nervous to trust more of a flex play than a number 2 wide receiver. McLaurin is now going with Marcus Mariota under center. Great, another quarterback that he's barely worked with since he's been back in practice and signing his contract. It's a great matchup otherwise. Again, somebody who's more of a low-end flex. I'd rather start Evans than McLaurin. And DJ Moore, 6 targets max through each of his first 2 games. I know it's going to be a high-scoring game. I expect him to be okay. I just don't think he's going to deliver like a top 24 wide receiver. And then 2 running backs are on that list. James Conner, he just hasn't looked good, and the touches haven't been there for him. And David Montgomery, the Lions are playing against Baltimore. I feel like this is going to be a floor game for Montgomery and a bunch of Lions this week. So I would take it easy with Montgomery. Again, somebody who might be a good flex play, certainly in non-PPR, but not somebody who you can count on to have like 70 total yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm with you. Jared Goff and Jameson Williams, 2 guys that I would like to avoid this week as well. You know, Goff was the start of the week for me last week, had a big game, 5 touchdowns, but that was the perfect setup for him because he was playing the Bears and he was playing indoors. Now he's going outdoors to play a defense in Baltimore. He has faced them 3 times in his career. He has yet to throw a touchdown pass against the Ravens. So this is the team, when he sees that uniform, he gets a little bit allergic to the end zone. And Jameson Williams, we were expecting a breakout season for him. It was great to see what he did last week, but he had 2 catches. He had 4 targets. He has 9 targets for the first 2 games of the season. That's not going to lead to a breakout campaign if he's not getting enough volume. So they could be chasing the score here, and that might help Jameson Williams. Now let's face it, this secondary has not played great through the first 2 weeks of the season, but one of those performances was against Buffalo in that frenetic comeback effort from Josh Allen. I think they'll be able to contain this Lions offense And I think what we saw last week from the Detroit offense is what we're going to see when they're playing favorable opponents at home. This is not one of those setups. So Goff and Williams, two guys you could sit. Two rookies that have gotten off to slow starts. Omarion Hampton, it's just unfortunate right now what he's looked like. And then the bad handoff exchange last week, which he was not credited for the fumble. I think that just leads to more touches for Najee Harris. Travis Hunter, I don't know what to expect at this point. The targets have been there for him. He's had two unfortunate plays where Trevor Lawrence has him open for a touchdown. One would have been a long play against Carolina in week 1. One was in the end zone against Cincinnati last week. There's just a lot of disconnect right now between Lawrence and his receivers, and the more Hunter plays on defense, the less I like him as a fantasy option. And Jerry Jeudy, really it's just all Browns. Stay away from the Browns this week. Facing the Green Bay Packers, that's going to be one of the best defenses we see all season. They basically eliminated a lot of offenses. You think about what they've done so far against wide receivers. McLaurin last week, you could say, okay, maybe still a little bit sluggish. Deebo Samuel does score a touchdown. They held Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams to single digits in PPR. This defense is tough. This is not an offense you want to trust. Okay. Jamey, Heath, and Dave will stay here and go over some quarterback things because we know that they have been hurt so far this season. But a reminder about FFT along with Adam Azer and guests. Scan the QR code and check out the fellas ASAP.